We recognize that the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect the Abenaki's spiritual relationship to the land, and we seek to honor their living traditions. We hope to learn from them how we can respect Mother Earth and each other.
Why are there so many songs about rainbows, and what's on the other side? Rainbows are visions, but only illusions, and rainbows have nothing to hide. So we've been told, and some choose to believe it. I know they're wrong, wait and see. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. Who said that wishes would be heard and answered when wished on the morning star? Someone thought of that, and someone believed it, and look what it's done so far. What's so amazing that keeps us stargazing, and what do we think we might see? Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me. All of us under its spell, we know that it's probably magic. Have you been sleeping, and have you heard voices? I've heard them calling my name. Is this the sweet sound that calls the young sailors? The voice might be one and the same. I've heard it too many times to ignore it. It's something that I'm supposed to be. Someday we'll find it, the rainbow connection, the lovers, the dreamers, and me.
Welcome. Welcome to Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. CVUUS is a progressive community of faith and filled with social action and colorful characters and meaningful engagement. I'm Reverend Liam Batches Greenwood, one of the worship associates for today. Our own pastor, Reverend Barnaby Feeder, has the Sunday off, although I think he's joining us. If you're a familiar face or a curious visitor, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Let me share a couple of pathways to connection with this congregation. If you're joining us by Zoom, then please stay afterwards for our social time. You can choose a breakout room that addresses the budget. You can choose a breakout room that engages David Moat. You can choose a breakout room that just puts you into a handful of other friends to chat with. If you're wondering how to turn some bitter squabble or disagreement into a sweet slice of peace, then join us for our Rhubarb Festival. I understand that one of the definitions of rhubarb is a bitter squabble. And we at Champlain Valley are amazing peacemakers. We take a bitter squabble and we work with it, add some sweetness, bake it up, and serve it to you with a lot of smiles and well wishes. our Rhubarb Festival is still going to be a drive-up affair this Saturday, June 5th, starting at 10 a.m. Starting at 10 a.m. and until 12 o'clock, or as long as the pies last. Check out our website at cvuus.org for other ways of connecting or for details that flew by. On this Memorial Day weekend, our nation pauses to remember other bitter squabbles, wars, quarrels, and battles for freedom and justice. Every morning in my home from Virgins, I walked through a neighborhood cemetery and I noticed which stones are from the Civil War. And today we're going to remember another Civil War. We remember those who served our country by battling for LGBTQ rights, especially the right to marry. We have with us David Moats as our featured speaker, who wrote a book called The Civil Wars, A Battle for Gay Marriage. David was awarded a Pulitzer Prize for his efforts and for his coverage of Vermont's work toward civil unions over 20 years ago. At the time, he was writing for the Rutland Herald. David has also written 8 plays, and he also led an independent newspaper called The Voice that was here in Middlebury. And I'm so happy that he is sharing his voice with us today, along with Jordan Young, who will be reflecting on the rights of people who identify as queer in the workplace, and Ash Mason, who will be representing the GSA, Gender, Sexuality, and Alliance group of Mums Middle School. Ash will be addressing the issue of including trans students in school sports. I've also invited 2 friends of mine to share some music with us today. Janalee Neuenhuis, my niece from Michigan, and Claire Gurry from Adelaide, South Australia. Claire and I protested at several Equal Love rallies when I was living in Australia, along with friends. And Janalee protested within my extended family to work for greater acceptance for me and for her brother and sister. These allies have joined me in legal, emotional, and familial battles as we try to find the freedom to be ourselves. The idea for this service came from 2 sources. The first, Mike and I were married at CVUUS over a year ago, and 2 friends from Michigan attended our celebration. And they said they were glad to attend because they wanted to celebrate their 20th anniversary a bit early. And then they told me about Vermont's civil union laws and that they had journeyed here 20 years ago. And they reminded me that my freedoms, my wedding, was made possible by the vulnerable work and the legal battles of many people years before. Well, those 2 friends, Bubba and Denny, also faced a battle with COVID this past year, and Denny did not survive that battle. So in some ways, this is a memorial service. A memorial service that I know is not traditional. It's focusing on people who are maybe at the margins of society. But that gets me to the second reason for the service. The theme for this month is centering on the margins, which is to look at life through the eyes of those who are not at the center of places of power and privilege, and to see the world through that perspective. With that, our call to worship is a poem about centering on the margins. This is also going to be our chalice lighting as we see chalices from so many different places. The very last slide, I will ask you to join me in reading it. I'm going to try to share my screen, see if it works. It's not quite coming up the way I thought it would. Nope. I'm going to have to stop sharing and try that again. Let me see that. Share the screen. Yeah, this is the way to do it. Thank you for your patience. It's still not there. Can you see it?
Liam, we see your whole screen right now.
What do you? Yeah, but I don't see my screen. How did that happen? Going to try to close some tabs. My apologies. I'm going to try this again. Try to share the screen. And with that, I'm going to ask Richard if you could open up that file of the of our call to worship. I'm glad we had a backup. Okay. I asked Richard.
I'm not sure I can find that on the fly, Liam. I'm sorry, I didn't have it ready to go.
Liam, be sure to choose the window you want to share.
Yeah.
Rather
right
than
there it is. I'm choosing the window. I'm sharing. And what do you see? Because I don't. Maybe if I go down here. I got it. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. You seeing it? Here we go. Burning the map of a flat earth. The chalice burns at the center as if it burns, and if it burns with justice, then it also burns out the center to remove the structures of privilege. Many stand back, uncomfortable and aware of the heat. The chalice burns at the center and sends light out in all directions, lighting the faces of those gathered at what some call the margins, as if the world was a flat piece of paper. No, there are no margins unless you are of the Flat Earth Society and claiming a privileged center that simply does not exist on the exterior of a globe spinning through space. May this globe spin toward equity and justice for all the beautiful faces empowered and free. May Indigenous faces replace Columbus Day with Invasion Day and sink the imperial powers that still sail over our economic seas. May Black people replace Independence Day with Emancipation Day and Black Lives Matter, expecting law officers to protect and serve the dream that matters. May women replace all men are created equal with equal pay and equal power for women and respect for all expressions of gender. May people living and working with disabilities push the cars of careless ableism out of their spaces and call for equal access and representation. May nations judged as developing or impoverished look upon the concentrations of wealth and cry foul, naming and shaming the pollution of rampant consumption. May LGBTQ voices dismantle traditional binary boxes to build gender fluid bathrooms, inclusive sport teams, and boxes for wedding cakes iced with rainbow dreams. May older adults who have structured boardrooms with institutional boards nailed down by habit be pulled outside
Liam, I have accidentally muted you. Please unmute yourself.
I think I did. The last slide, if everybody could join me. Oh yes, the chalice burns with justice, and the flame burns out the center. So light might shine around a world that has no margins. It is not a flat earth, but a multi-dimensional globe of amazing grace.
We have cleared off the table, the leftovers saved, washed the dishes and put them away. I have told you a story and tucked you in tight at the end of your knockabout day, as the moon sets its sails to carry you to sleep over the midnight sea. I will sing you a song no one sang to me. May it keep you in good company. You can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know I will love you still. You can live by yourself. You can gather friends around. You can choose one special one, and the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done. There are girls who grow up strong and bold. There are boys quiet and kind. Some race on ahead, some follow behind, some go in their own way and time. Some women love women, some men love men, some raise children, some never do. You can dream of a day never reaching the end of everything that's possible for you. Don't be rattled by names, by taunts, by games, but seek out spirits true. If you give your friends the best part of yourself, they will give the same back to you. You can be anybody you want to be. You can love whomever you will. You can travel any country where your heart leads, and know I will love you still. You can live by yourself. You can gather friends around. You can choose one special one, and the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done. And the only measure of your words and your deeds will be the love you leave behind when you're done.
Thank you, Janalee. That's a happy song with a lot of memories for a lot of people, and that was shared in a happy way. For our time for all ages, I'd like to tell the story about Mike and I's wedding, because it was a time for all ages. Let's see. See, a wedding is not just the story of two people coming together. It is a story of coming together of many different stories involving people of all ages. And so it was on January 18 of 2020, just 2 months before COVID restrictions. Mike and Liam got married. Luke and Lydia, my children, traveled from Australia to walk their dad down the aisle, knowing love can reach around the world. And for 6-month-old Patrick, it was his first wedding. He probably won't remember it, but his family will. When his mom was a little girl, she was one of the first people to hold Lydia Batches, my daughter, as a baby. So yeah, babies won't remember the wedding, but the people who hold the babies will certainly hold on to memories for them. Hey, another Lydia, age 5, well, she traveled all the way from East Middlebury with her mom, and she read from her original book of poetry about love. She was so excited to be invited to a wedding. She will remember that a wedding is a celebration of love between two people, and it comes with good cake from Otter Creek Bakery and some loving poetry. The photographer, Cassie, and the server, Walt, they showed that colorful people come in a variety of ages, but we're all part of the human rainbow. Oh, Baxter and Carol, who I don't have a picture of, Sydney, Poppy, and Kate, well, they showed that musical people come in a variety of ages and styles, and each person adds their own music and lovely smile. Well, everyone had their own way of dancing at the wedding too, but everyone was welcome on the dance floor of life, no matter who you wanted to dance with. One couple of friends drove from Michigan to Vermont almost 20 years ago, and they made the drive to Vermont to enter a civil union. They were a bit early in celebrating their 20th anniversary, but glad they came. And this was their last dance together before COVID hit. One story at the wedding was Mike and Liam getting married, but everybody brought the stories of their lives. Vermont also brought a story of being a place that bravely grew into the idea that any two loving people can be joined into the adventure of marriage. That is, if they say, I do. So it was a time for all ages, and it's a time that I'm hoping becomes a story for others so that they know you can marry anybody that you really love, as long as they say I do. So now it's a song by Claire Gurry, written when marriage wasn't an option, but civil union was. And so it's about, will you civil union me?
Something to say, and I saw these zirconia bracelets today. We are young and we are free, so darling, will you civil union me? 'Cause I'd rejoice if you civil union me. Well, Julie says that zircons are forever, and they'll be on special when we buy two. So I hope you say yes, I do want you don't cry, then it don't mean a thing if we ain't got that little set of golden rings. 'Cause we've been a couple now so many years, and if you like, I can buy you gold bands for your ears. Yes, maybe it doesn't have quite the same ring as diamonds are forever, but tell me what you think, 'cause I am young and you are still free. So darling, will you civil union me? 'Cause this is love and belonging. This is love and belonging. My hand in yours, you and me, you and me. Love, love, love and belonging. You and me. You and me, you and me. And I know that we don't want to travel far, only as far as we can drive in our car. So let me take you down to the local town hall while our family and friends wait nearby the mall. So please say you'll do it, then I'll post it online with a big I heart you and forever mine sign. 'Cause it's you and me, babe, who will always be lovers. Some citizens are just a little bit more equal than others. Oh my darling, I have something to say. Saw these zirconia bracelets today. We are young and they say we're free. So darling, will you civil union me? 'Cause I'd rejoice if you civil union me. Yes, I'd be delighted to civil union you.
Sometimes I have felt alone in the world as being in a gay relationship. And so when I felt that way, I thought I'd pull together some pictures of friends who I knew were either married or in a civil union relationship. And those were all friends of mine in Australia or here and different places. And I realized, my goodness, I'm not alone, that we're surrounded by different expressions of love. We're now at the time of the offering, which is also an expression of love. Today's our donee is the Sandy Hook Promise. And in preparation for this, Mike bought some t-shirts for the Sandy Hook Promise. Because we're both educators, we feel strongly that children should be protected from gun violence and protected from all sorts of violence. So as you consider giving of yourself, give as generously as possible as a way of making sure our children, when they go to school, are protected and loved. Thank you. For our milestones and passages, if you have a thought you'd like to share, you're welcome to put it in the chat. And I know I didn't give you much chance or much warning, but if you want to quickly put it in the chat, be happy to share that. While you're doing that, I would share this one that came in, that this Tuesday will be the 100th anniversary of the atrocious attack on the neighborhood of Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, as the fist of white power and privilege sought to destroy this prosperous Black community. Mike Greenwood, my husband, writes this: over 1,000 homes and businesses, 1,000 homes and businesses were looted. 35 square blocks were reduced to cinders and ashes. And what did the white Tulsa City Fathers tell the world? We are not going to rebuild. Those people should just move on. Death toll estimates begin at over 300 lives lost, and many bodies have never been recovered. Over the years, documents from those days are missing. Tulsa's newspaper articles, even the ones in the public library, have disappeared. Photographs and witnesses threatened if they spoke out, and even cemetery documents indicating where some were buried can no longer be found. There was a great effort to try to hide what was done. Let's not hide from it. Let's remember, and not forget. May 31st, June 1, 1921. And what white racist fear did to the people of Greenwood. Let's pause and remember, and then continue the battle against racial violence and inequities within our world and within our communities. Other milestones and passages about racial justice, Jordan and I are going to share those that led up to Vermont being a place celebrating same-sex marriage. So these are some milestones and bill passages of LGBTQ rights in Vermont. 1983, the first Vermont Gay Pride Parade, supported by Burlington Mayor Bernie Sanders and organized by Fred Sargent. In the city of Burlington and in the state of Vermont, people have the right to exercise their lifestyles, Mayor Sanders said. It's an American right. Everyone's right to have a march. This is a civil liberties question.
In 1989, Outright Vermont was formed to support LGBTQ youth. The 1988 National Youth Risk Survey revealed that gay and lesbian youth had high rates of depression and suicide. Concerned Vermonters responded by forming Outright to provide weekly meetings of support and safe places for queer youth.
1990, Governor Madeleine May Kunin signs hate crime bills sponsored by David Walk. This came as a response to the beating of Roger McComber, who was attacked in Burlington near Pearl's Bar, severely beaten and left near dead in an alley.
In 1993, the Vermont Supreme Court made Vermont the first state to approve gay adoption. The court found the purpose of the adoption law was not to prohibit certain combinations of individuals from adopting, but rather to provide legal security for children. Thus, a co-parenting woman who was the partner of a biological mother should be allowed to adopt.
1995, Daddy's roommate is found in the Rutland Library. Well, of course, if gay parents are permitted to adopt, they will need some stories to read to their children. And when this book by Michael Wilhoit appeared in Rutland Library while several concerned citizens protested this book, but their objections were put to bed.
In 1999, petitions from 3 couples were heard by the Vermont Supreme Court, which challenges the legislature to provide same-sex couples with the same protections as heterosex couples. Stan Baker, Peter Harrigan, Holly Puderbaugh, Lois Farnham, and Nina Beck and Stacy Joels made the case for marriage equality.
April 2000, Vermont is the first state to recognize same-sex relations with civil union. Governor Howard Dean signed civil unions into law. Throughout the legislature's debate, one couple, Nina Beck and Stacy Joels, stood holding their baby son Seth beneath a portrait of George Washington. Moments after the vote, Ms. Joels turned to Ms. Beck and offered a new version of the traditional proposal. See you, me.
April 2009, Vermont legislature overrides the veto to approve marriage equality. Despite a clear majority and popular support, Governor Jim Douglas vetoed the bill, urging Congress to focus on the economy instead. But the veto was overturned. Quote, "We've shown that truth and fairness and justice and love are more important than one man's veto pen," said same-sex advocate Beth Robinson to cheers from supporters after Vermont's House passed the bill by a 100-49 vote.
In 2013, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, and in favor of Edith and Thea. In United States versus Windsor, the court held that DOMA was unconstitutional, asserting that because Edith Windsor and Thea Spire were married in Canada in 2007, even though Thea died a year later, Edith could inherit their estate as a surviving spouse.
July 2015, the U.S. Supreme Court catches up with Vermont and affirms marriage equality as a civil right. Each of these milestones marks a point on a curve, the arc of justice, as Dr. King referred to it. When Unitarian minister Theodore Parker coined that phrase, he expanded the metaphor. He pointed out that this arc is a long one and that our eyes reach but little ways. Our eyes, too, reach but little ways along this arc. Margie and I knew Edie Windsor back in the 1980s in New York. But as a cis-het couple, our eyes did not see the injustice she faced as a lesbian. We saw her only as a colleague, acquaintance, fellow volunteer, very smart, and wickedly funny. We didn't see the injustice of her situation. Every day, even in Vermont, it's easy to miss the points on that arc. The fire chief in Heinsberg, who on social media ridicules the people whom he is sworn to protect, and yet my queer friend, who drives his 4-year-old past the fire station every day to daycare, indulges his small child's enthusiasm for fire trucks without social commentary. But my friend's eyes see the injustice. These injustices exist along with the very personal and painful passages of life. Dick Nesson shares that Susan wanted to be with us but is recovering from colon cancer surgery that happened the day before yesterday. She's doing very well and her prognosis is excellent, he says. She sends her love. Nita Hansen shares with us that her mother, Pat Hansen, passed away yesterday afternoon, peacefully and surrounded by those she loved. Please join with me in keeping all of them in our hearts. That compassion can exist with our reflection of how, to paraphrase Reverend Parker, our eyes reach but little way on the long arc of the moral universe. How we can calculate that curve and complete it by our experience and divine it by conscience. I invite you to a time of compassion, to reflect, to contemplate, and to divine that arc and that compassion by conscience. Our reading today is from Civil Wars, The Battle for Gay Marriage by David Moats, a work which emerged from his Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial work at the Rutland Herald during the time of these debates in Vermont. Where the Westford Road nears the Westford town line, the land flattens out, affording a magnificent view of Mount Mansfield, Vermont's highest peak. In April 1997, the pale green of spring had yet to touch that mountainside. Lois Farnham and Holly Puderbaugh lived on the Westford Road in the town of Milton. They had 150 acres and operated a small Christmas tree farm behind their ranch house and three-car garage. On April 25, 1997, they got into their car and headed to town. The road descended through woods, passing a tall, weathered barn, a scattering of unremarkable houses, and the Milton Wood Products plant. They pulled up at the town clerk's office. They were nervous about the step they were taking. It was, "Gulp, here goes," Holly said later. They'd called the day before to say they were coming and what they wanted. The clerk, John Cushing, was someone they had known for many years. He was grateful for the warning. He would have time to prepare a letter telling them why it wasn't in his power to grant them a marriage license. He was a gentleman about the whole thing. Nobody wanted any hard feelings. It wasn't a surprise to him that Holly and Lois considered themselves a couple, but there was nothing he could do to help them. That the legal and social revolution leading to the creation of civil unions in Vermont had its beginning on an ordinary Tuesday in this ordinary town should not be surprising. The movement toward civil unions was based on the premise that marriage for gays and lesbians ought to be as commonplace as it was for anyone else. But because the issue was about sex and love, it unleashed fear and confusion among many people, and the hatreds on display were real. But the hatred was countered by an instinct toward neighborliness and courtesy. John Cushing knew Holly and Lois. He didn't want to be unkind. The law was the law, at least for the time being. That was something that all understood. By June, Stacy Joels, Nina Beck, Stan Baker, and Peter Harrington had visited the town clerks in South Burlington and Shelburne. In order to pursue a court case, each couple had to seek a marriage license. Now all the plaintiffs had letters explaining that town clerks were not empowered by Vermont law to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. The stage was set for the historic case they hoped would end up changing the law.
Thank you. Now it's my time to speak, and I'm grateful for that reading. That was a particularly appropriate passage because it shows two things. You spoke of the long arc of justice. Well, the arc of justice on the issue of gay rights was long indeed. It's often said that the Stonewall riots in New York City in 1969 were the beginning of the gay rights movement, but really it had been going on long before that. And it had proceeded through the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and here in the mid-90s, Holly and Lois got in their car and drove down to the town clerk's office in Milton. So we see that any social movement is long, and it's also very simple. Simple in the sense that these were two ordinary people doing something quite ordinary, at least it should be. Go get a marriage license. And Liam referred to this moment as a Rosa Parks moment. Rosa Parks was doing something quite simple, sitting down on a bus to assert a basic individual right. And yet she was part of a long movement, the arc of social justice. She was part of a movement. She was an activist, just as Lois and Holly became activists. The case that was prepared for argument before the Supreme Court, the movement to build that case began in the mid-90s with the work of two lawyers from Middlebury, Beth Robinson and Susan Murray. There's one story that Susan Murray tells about when she read in the paper in the mid-90s about a terrible car accident down in Mendon, where it was a head-on collision. Two women and a baby were in one car. They were a couple raising a child who was the biological son of one of the women. The biological mother died. The other mother wanted to continue to be a parent to her child, but the parents of the biological mother fought it in court and didn't want to allow this other woman to have custody of her child. Susan Murray, lawyer, saw this and said, this is just what gay and lesbian couples are up against every day in many different ways. And she and Beth Robinson, they were both lawyers at Langrock and Sperry in Middlebury, decided to take action. They formed the Freedom to Marry Task Force, and they began to go around the state, step by step, meeting by meeting, spreading the word that they were moving towards marriage equality. Now, today we may take for granted marriage equality. The words gay marriage back in the 90s were scary to very many people. And you could see that there was reference to the controversy in Rutland about the book Daddy's Roommate. It showed up in the Rutland library. Some people found it, and it wasn't a few people who objected. Hundreds of people came out to 2 public hearings to speak for and against this book. I was writing editorials about it at the time. And so mid-90s, this issue was percolating. And anybody who was following it knew that it would be a very volatile issue. People were not ready for gay marriage. Many people were not. But Beth and Susan put together, found 3 couples who were willing to step forward and do the Rosa Parks thing and seek a marriage license. Their marriage licenses were denied, and they built a case. It made its way to the Vermont Supreme Court. Beth argued before the court. It was a brilliant argument. I've seen it on tape. It's been used in law schools as a model of the kind of argument that can be made before a high court. And another point to be made about a successful social movement is persistent and clear, articulate leadership is essential, and that's what happened in Vermont. They argued their case, and then on December 20th, 1999, the decision in the Baker case came down. I was at work when they faxed the decision to us at the Rutland Herald, and I read it. And it was up to us basically at that moment to decide where we stood, and it was clear that we would support the Baker decision written by Chief Justice Jeff Amestoy, which was unanimous in support of the rights of marriage for same-sex couples. The one problematic thing about the decision was that the court left it in the hands of the legislature to decide how to give the rights and benefits of marriage to same-sex couples. Would it be the full rights of marriage? Would they call it marriage? Or would it be something else? The phrase civil union didn't exist at that point. It was up to the legislature to decide. And it began with the House Judiciary Committee, led by Tom Little, a Republican from Shelburne, who was steady, clear, focused, held hearings, tense, dramatic hearings, and they, at one point, finally had to decide, no, we're not going to grant the we're not going to create gay marriage. We're going to create something else. In a committee hearing, they devised the phrase civil unions. So Beth and Susan, who had been arguing for marriage equality, were faced with a dilemma. And here is a kind of moment any social movement might face. Were they going to support what they considered half a loaf? Civil union is not marriage. They wanted marriage. They considered it second-class status. Or were they going to settle for that, or were they going to hold out and say, no, we're only going to settle for full rights of marriage? They decided strategically they needed to get what they could get. They signed on for civil unions and lent their support, and it was crucial through the course of that year, that winter and spring. There were huge public hearings. It was very volatile. There was a lot of anger, a lot of hate. The legislators received hate mail. They're inundated with hate mail and vicious stuff. They attended meetings with the public, some of them very scary. The climax in the Vermont House came on the day when the House was going to vote on the civil unions bill. And one of the leaders was, and one of the heroes of the whole movement was Bill Lippert, who was vice chairman of the House Judiciary Committee and the only openly gay member of the House. He stood and he spoke, and it was one of those speeches that is remembered in history. People remember it. It was silent in the House as he spoke about love and his partner. And he spoke, and then the next thing that happened was a Republican House member named Bob Kinsey stood up, and he's dyed-in-the-wool Republican conservative farmer from the Northeast Kingdom. He stood up and said, "Just want you to know that's the greatest speech I ever heard." And he announced that he was going to support civil unions. At that moment, I didn't cover the civil unions. I was at the newspaper in Rutland. I wasn't at the Capitol that much, but I was in the balcony that day. That moment, I knew that if I was going to write about this story, I would write about Bill Lippert and I would write about Bob Kinsey, because Bob Kinsey represented the kind of traditional old-time Vermonter who could come around and actually see the legitimacy of this case. Anyhow, the civil unions, anybody who lived through that time remembers it as one of the most divisive and bitter and hard-fought kind of periods that they ever. I have often likened it to the era of the Vietnam War. Nothing as divisive had ever occurred since then, and it continued on through the election of 2000, when Howard Dean was running against a conservative Republican, Ruth Dwyer, and he won. But the House was, the Republicans retook the House, Democrats held the Senate. That's how it went. There was a little bit of a retaliation against Democrats, but things settled down. Fast forward towards the mid-2000s, Freedom to Marry people thought, we need to go for full equality. And as was told, Peter Champlain, who was then leader of the Vermont Senate, decided now's the time. He brought forth a marriage equality bill, passed the Senate, went to the House passed it, vetoed by Governor Douglas, and the veto was overridden by the Senate. And one of the climactic moments of my whole career in journalism occurred when it came time for the House to vote on whether to override, because they needed a 2/3 vote. No one knew how it would turn out. I got to the House chamber late that day because I was trying to find a place to park. I come up and the doors of the House chamber are closed. The lobby is full of people. The roll call has already begun. Aye and nay, aye and nay. Some people are keeping a tally. And you could hear Speaker Shap Smith, and he was tallying. And then he said, "Here is the result of your vote." And he said, "Aye 100 and nay 50." And so it's exactly 2/3. There's not a vote to spare. And pandemonium erupted. It had been 20 years for this struggle. And with the bang of a mallet, of a gavel, the law was changed. Nothing could change it back. It was, there it was. Free marriage equality existed with the bang of a gavel. And so even Beth Robinson was weeping. She's a pretty tough character, and she's now on the Supreme Court. But there was some videotape that I saw of this. I was there, but I saw this videotape, and there was Beth. She just kind of melted. Anyhow, there's certain lessons to be drawn from this that continue on. I have not been covering this issue as a journalist so much now, but what we learn through all of this is that we all have to learn about who we are, whether we're gay, we're straight, we're trans, we're wherever we are on the spectrum. We have to learn about who we are, and we have to respect, if we want anyone to respect who we are, we have to respect who others are. And that is the struggle that continues. And it's not unlike the struggle, the long struggle that has been underway all this time. And I know the focus now is on trans folks. And so I think we learned the lesson here that the arc is long, and the battle exists with each individual who behaves, who demands respect and dignity, and behaves even with their opponent, towards their opponents, with respect and dignity, to carry the struggle forward. And it's a struggle that rests with each individual. And Liam suggested I close with one anecdote that occurred regarding my book, Civil Wars. Bill Lippert conveyed to me that a few years ago, he got a message from some kid out in Ohio in some little town. I think it was a teenage boy. He said he found this book on the shelf of his library, and it was my book, Civil Wars, and it contained this story about Bill Lippert, the House member, and his brave and eloquent speech on the floor of the House that day. And this boy was so moved by this, he wanted to get in touch with Bill Lippert and thank him. So my book served as a vehicle for this. The important thing was that this boy could realize that he was not alone. He had a friend out there, Bill Lippert, an inspiration, and you know, friends everywhere. And so each individual can, we're all part of this, you know. I guess that's how I wanted to close. So thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. If you can go to gallery view, in other words, all of our faces, then we can do the typical UU response of saying you are loved and appreciated.
Well, I don't know how to do gallery view. I think I've screwed up my screen, but
you'll have to imagine a whole spectrum of colorful characters who are waving their hands in affirmation.
Okay, thank you. I do see you all there. Yeah.
Hang in there, my friends, because I wanted to give a very special person the last word, because this is about the past. The present the present legal arguments about trans students or students with gender fluidity, and will they find a place of acceptance and inclusion on our sports fields, or even when they're trying to find a bathroom in our school hallways? And I have the privilege of being the leader of our GSA, Gender Sexuality Alliance group at the middle school. And Ash Mason, a member of our church, is part of that. And I have learned so much from Ash this year as she has changed her pronouns and has identified herself as a trans student so graciously, so kindly, but knowing that she needs the support of family and friends around her. And so the last word is going to go to Ash, and Ash is going to read a letter that our GSA group worked out about inviting Vermont to continue to be a brave little state and offer gender inclusive sports. So with that, Ash Mason.
Dear leaders of education and athletics in Addison County and Vermont State, as students and teachers, we are appalled by the laws being considered by some Midwestern and Southern states against allowing trans students to participate in athletic events according to their self-identity. Growing up and discerning who you are as a young adult is difficult enough without the fear of humiliating expectations, invasive scrutiny, and fear of legal action. We applaud those students and families who are brave enough to stand up against this binary discrimination to say, I may be trans, gender fluid, or queer in some way, but at the end of the day, I'm part of the human race, a race that loves to run, compete, play, and pursue happiness. I have a right to be included within public sporting activities on the basis of who I am and how I name my own identity. In contrast to restrictive states, we invite Vermont to stand up with us and be a brave little state that does not legislate traditional binary boxes in education and athletics, but rather structures and promotes the inclusion of gender diversity within educational and athletic organizations and events, especially during the middle grade years, 5th through 9th grade. During young adolescence, there is greater development difference in strength, balance, and athletic abilities in one gender than there is between the genders. Estrogen enhances growth early, 5th to 8th grade, and testosterone stimulates development later, 8th to 10th grade. Consequently, most of the difference in athletic development during the middle grades is due to socialization and life experience, but not biological gender. So why do we divide students into boys basketball and girls softball, boys baseball and girls gymnastics? Many of these divisions are a result of cultural stereotypes that are reinforced by promotions, sign-ups, team uniforms, coaching, and expectations. What would be the benefits of athletic programs that are deliberately inclusive of gender diversity? First, fewer students who are discerning their gender identity would attempt suicide. Quite simply, it's easier to accept yourself if there is real evidence in the community that you are acceptable. When a student sees a unisex bathroom sign or a sign-up for a gender-diverse baseball team, then they can more easily believe that they will be safe and welcomed within the community. Second, students can focus on a game of sports and not the divisions of society. Comments like you throw like a girl or walk it off like a man will be replaced with more helpful comments like you could do some work on your throwing and catching, or know when to stretch it and when to rest it. In short, we can play on an inclusive field of sport rather than get stuck in divisive boxes of stereotypes. Third, students will benefit from having at least 3 years of adolescent development that refrains from pressuring them into gender binary choices. We have been challenging the socialization of gender for over 75 years, ever since Rosie the Riveter proclaimed, "We can do it." Girls can play baseball, guys can do gymnastics, trans girls can run track, gender fluid students can play basketball. We can do it. Fourth, an athletic program that integrates gender diversity can help the cisgendered majority practice working within teams of diversity. This life skill of accepting differences while pursuing a common goal may lead to safer college campuses, more productive workplaces, and more empathetic leaders. The important question we are asking is this: can Vermont be a brave little state and create a safe and inviting space for all students to cooperate and compete without separate separating students into the traditional binary boxes of gender expectations. We look forward to answering this question positively and proactively. We look forward to athletic directors, school boards, and leaders of public education working with GSA and student leadership groups around the state in drafting policies and best practices that can be a shining example for a nation divided. Much like Vermont's shown the way in honoring the same-sex marriage laws by proclaiming, "Let love be love," now we can shine the way in including gender diversity by simply saying, "Let sport be sport." This small change in our part can support young people who are wrestling with big changes on their part as they wonder, will my school allow me to be me? We appreciate your attention to this, the GSA of Middlebury Union Middle School.
I know that was quite a complicated letter, but I have some amazing students that I work with, and they're deep thinkers. And they have taught me what it means to live out your true colors. So I leave you with the last song, True Colors, and may you be true to yourself and continue to affirm those around you and delight in all the colors that are part of being human. Blessed be.
You with the sad eyes, don't be discouraged, oh I realize it's hard to take courage in a world full of people. You can lose sight of it all, and the darkness inside you can make you feel so small. But I see your true colors shining through. Yeah, I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful like a rainbow. Show me a smile then. Don't be unhappy, can't remember when I last saw you laughing. If this world makes you crazy and you're taking all you can bear, you call me up, 'cause you know I'll be there, and I'll see your true colors shining through. And I see your true colors, and that's why I love you. So don't be afraid to let them show your true colors. True colors are beautiful.
Thank you, everybody, for hanging in there with our technical problems. But I hope that you were able to look past those and enjoy the gifts of the many people that contributed to the service. I really appreciate it, from Ash's reading to my niece's last song to David's voice and partnering with Jordan. Gosh, thank you to everybody. Really, you fill my heart.